Please confirm, is that my screen is visible?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's start from where we stopped yesterday. So today we'll be having the discussion on Spring Core, and we'll continue with that, and we'll try to complete it, the part of the Spring Core, and then we'll try to move on to the Spring JDBC. So before we get into that Spring JDBC, the Spring Core, the remaining part is going to be a little important. Okay, so stay attentive, and if you have any queries, try to raise it then and there so that you get clarified before we move on with the next Spring library called Spring JDBC. Okay, so I guess yesterday we stopped with certain configuration part by using some UT profile. So this is what we saw in the last class. Hope my text is visible. So yesterday we saw this part, right? The annotation config application context, and we got the context object and got the environment from where we are going to which we are going to set the profile. So this is very important. The method what we are using here is to get the runtime environment from where the application is getting executed. Okay, it's application environment. So on top of that environment, we are trying to set the active profile and making the active profile to be of a prod. We have multiple profiles out there, prod, dev, and I guess we had QA, right? So right now we are enabling the prod, and we are registering the multiple classes out here, and we are refreshing the context, and that's it. Our IOC containers setting is done. Okay, so this is completely for the IOC container settings, which is completely done, and your IOC container is ready to get access. Now, if you look at this part from here, where we are trying to access the bean instances by using the get bean method, this is very first time from the starting point of the class, we are supposed to get the first bean in order to initiate your workflow of the application. So you can't just directly go for auto wired here, okay? Because here where you are initializing the container, and the very first class you need to acquire through get bean, and from there any flow of the classes will go through the channel of auto wiring mechanisms. So right now, let's try to execute this and see, because right now I've just moved the code into the older version of Spring Tool Suite. So there is some error. iMessage service. Okay, this is because of the dependency that it has 3 dependencies out there. So that's the reason that it is throwing the error. So we need to enable this method level profiling. So now the error is resolved because we are accessing only the prod configuration. Before, what happened? It was carrying all the 3 instances in the object pool. And so it was confused that because iMessage service can be of type SMS service or Twitter service or mail service. So there are 3 objects. Which object you are trying to inject? You're asking me to inject. The IOC container asks the environment that which instance do I need to inject, because I found 3 instances. So I'm literally confused. Now the problem is resolved because I'm very specific that you just pick the prod configured instance. Anyways, that is the only instance that's going to be instantiated. These 2 instances are not going to be instantiated. Please make a note of it. These 3 beans, okay, all the 3 beans are not going to be instantiated. Rather, it is just going to instantiate only the SMS service because that's what the profile says, prod profile. And so here we have already given the settings to be as prod, right? And that's matchable. Before the IOC container starts its workaround on the instantiation part, it is actually looking out for the profile out here, and it identifies the right profile and creates an instance for it. Now the next question is the IOC container creating an instance for Twitter service and the mail service? No, obviously not. These 2 instances are not getting created because they don't fall under that profile of prod. That is what it means. Okay. Fine. So now one understanding is, I thought of taking you to that. Probably before we move on with further understanding of the other annotations, I just give you a light on the specific container level progress that actually happens. It will take some time. Okay, so this is one picture which I thought I would like to share it with you people so that you can understand what actually happens in the container level progress. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, the main focus for us is to focus on this application context. Application context is created. That's step number 1. Are we doing that? Yes, that is the first step that we are doing, correct? So if you go to this app class, the very first step that we are doing is creating the context object. Creating the context object. That's the very first step. So once you create the context object itself, it means that your container is initialized. That's the meaning, right? So the very first step is the context object, and the context is created, meaning is the IOC container is ready. Okay, it's initialized and it's ready. Now the container have to go through certain steps. Okay, it has to go through certain steps, certain workflows. And what are those workflows? Step number 1, bean definitions are loaded. Bean definitions are loaded. So from where the bean definitions will be loaded? Bean definitions. Where we will give the bean definitions? Bean definition. See, there are 2 things to make a note of it. Whenever I'm saying bean, it means Spring Bean. Okay, there are two beans actually we have. One is Java bean, another one is Spring Bean. Okay, so Spring Bean means it's a Pojo class actually. Okay, Pojo class, plain old Java object class, and those classes are managed by Spring, so that it's going to be called as a Spring Bean. Okay, if it's a Pojo class not managed by Spring Bean, then it is going to be called as a Java Bean. So in a Spring application, you can have both Spring Bean and Java Bean. Once we go to the Spring JDBC demo, you will understand what I mean by Java Bean. Please make a note of it. All Java classes that you are going to create inside the Spring application, all the Java classes need not be a Spring Bean class. Inside a Spring application, certain object can be a Java Bean object also. Why? In sense, those Java classes will never be managed by Spring environment. Managed by Spring environment meaning is IOC container will never step in to managing such kind of a classes, and those classes are going to be called as a Java Bean classes. Okay, anything that is managed by IOC container, we can give a technical name called Spring Bean. Okay, those class will be a part of Spring Bean. Those class object will be of a Spring Bean object. Is that clear? So the first step is IOC container is initialized. The second step is bean definitions are loaded. From where the IOC container will load the bean definitions? From XML. Okay, or it can be from Java-based configuration. Okay, combined with annotation. Correct? So this is what the flow is. Either XML plus annotations will be considered as a bean definition, or Java config plus annotation can be a consideration. In some cases, as I explained yesterday, that if there are legacy applications are there. Okay, if you have some legacy application written using older version of Spring, where you are entitled to use only XML at that time, then you can import the XML configuration along with Java configuration and combine with annotation. All three can be combined together and handed over to the IOC as a bean definition. So what is the next step that the IOC does is it is going to define the bean. It is going to accept the bean definitions, load the bean definitions. That's step number one. Step number two, bean definitions are processed after loading that file, right? Those files are loaded. After loading, it is reading those configurations line by line. The IOC container will read. It will go line by line and does its job. So processing of those bean definitions will happen. Number three, based on the configuration, it will start instantiating the beans. So whenever I say beans here, what it means? It's a Spring Bean because it is managed by whom? IOC container. So that we are giving a technical term called Spring Bean. Right. So load definition beans. Then you have another step which is called as the dependencies are injected. Okay. So after creating all the instances, so let's say object 1, object 2, object 3, object 4, all are going to be injected to each other. Okay, injection service. So one object need to be injected to another bean, and that's going to be considered as an injection service. So dependencies, if one object is depending on another object, that object need to be injected. That definition is also there in the file. So dependencies are injected. Then you have something called beans processed. Okay. Finally, the beans are processed and it is readily available for the application to make use of it. The application, the whole application is ready to make use of those beans with the help of wiring. Let's say, for example, at auto wired. Correct. So when we say at auto wired, we are actually trying to make use of the beans which is already instantiated and kept ready. So beans are finally processed. The objects are finally processed and beans are ready to be used. OK, so these are the beans that are available in the object pool. So beans means you consider this as an object. OK, and application stops the application context. For example, we are currently using the object right now. When the application context is stopped, means when the IOC container is stopped, the beans, whatever we have created, I mean, whatever the IOC container has instantiated and injected and processed, those beans will get destroyed. That is a mean. OK, that will get destroyed. So that is the understanding. Just a second, give me a minute of time. Hello. Am I audible? Please confirm.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Thank you. So yeah, so looking at this, so that's what it happened. That is what the actual process that happens. So I hope you're getting more clarity out of what IOC container is actually trying to do here, right? So finally, the beans are getting destroyed. But do we have such way to destroy and see if the beans are getting destroyed? Physically, we cannot see that, but we can ensure that the beans are going to get destroyed. And that's what we are going to see with the help of the lifecycle methods. I'm going to show you through a lifecycle method so that you can understand that your beans are getting instantiated and we will be using the beans and finally the bean will get destroyed. Okay, so we have a lifecycle method. We can create our own lifecycle method like init. What do we mean by init is init is not at the time of initializing the instance. After initializing the instance, what should happen for that object? You're getting it. So for example, let's say I'm asking the the IOC container to create an object for employee, correct? So what the IOC container will do, looking at the configuration of the file, it will go ahead and create the employee. It will go ahead and create the employee object. Once the object is created, the moment the object is created, it should go and call the lifecycle method called init. There is a meaning. It should go ahead and call the init method so that whatever additional process that we want to do inside this initialization method can be done. And that is called as post construct. It is called as post construct. Post, please make a note of it. It is post. Okay. Post constructing the object. What should happen to that object? You can define that with the help of this custom method, custom lifecycle method that we can create called init. The next thing is we have a destroy method. So there are two lifecycle methods that we can have. Any name you can use. Okay, any name you are entitled to use. But the thing is, it should be in the order like post construct, and it is called as a pre-destroy. Okay, pre-destroy means before the object is going to be destroyed. That is what I was trying to mean here. If you look at this statement, beans are being destroyed, right? So meaning is before the beans are going to be destroyed, it is called as a pre-destroy, post construct and pre-destroy methods. And for this pre-destroy, we are able to have the destroy method in place. Here it is an init and here it is a destroy. You're getting it? So we'll see this. Based on this, you can understand when the object is getting initialized and when the object is getting destroyed. Okay, that we can understand very clearly, and the IOC container will invoke those methods accordingly. Post construct method is there means IOC container after creating an instance, automatically it will go and call the init method. If you have a destroy method configured as a pre-destroy, before throwing it into the garbage, okay, before the object goes into the garbage, your destroy method will get invoked. That is a meaning. Okay, so this is a basic fundamental. Anyways, we'll see the demo, you will understand. Hope this diagram gives you a little bit of clarity. Okay, just a second. Yeah, so you can see a little bit of clarity here. So if you have any questions on this flow, please do let me know. There are three phases that happens. One is the bean is kept ready. So all these are the parts of IOC container. If you see the dotted lines, right? So it's all a part of the IOC container. The first part is here, which is loading the bean definition. The second part, okay, is your beans are getting created and injected and processed, and your beans are readily available, and you will make use of the beans. And once the context IOC container is going to be shut down, I'm going to shut down the IOC container, or I'm going to close the IOC container. At that time, the container will quickly go and start destroying the objects. But before IOC container destroys the object, it will go and call the pre-destroy methods if there are any. If you have configured explicitly a pre-destroy method, that pre-destroy method will get invoked. That is the meaning. Is that clear? So if you have any questions on this diagram, please let me know. I found this that this diagram can give you more added value to understand the IOC container. You can quickly remember this during the sit through of an interview. Okay, and just recall this quickly. You will gain the knowledge of IOC container, and you can come up with a better answers to the question that might be posted relevant to the IOC. IOCs are represented in the code via the application context. When you create an application context object, it means IOC container is initialized. That is the meaning. Okay. Fine. So anyways, I'll go to one more last diagram. So here what it means is, okay, so if you look at it here, it's all the same. Bean definitions are loaded. Step number 1. Bean definitions are processed, instantiated. Okay, dependencies are injected, like either a setter based call or a constructor based injection. Okay, or it can be through auto wiring mechanisms. The injection can also happen. Post process bean before initialization, beans are initialized, and post process bean after initialization is also there. Okay, so beans are ready to be used. So before the bean is ready to be used, you have something called post processing bean before initialization and after initialization, and you have a beans are initialized. Beans are initialized. Make a note of these two status. This is nothing to do with that lifecycle methods. Okay, when the IOC container is completing the initialization phase of a bean, before the initialization phase, there is one tracker. Okay, it's like a tracker, right? And after initialization, there is another tracker. These trackers can be tracked more. It is all relevant to more complex application involvement. If you want to track these things, you have something called bean post processor. Bean post processor. Okay, you can extend this bean post processor, and you can customize your IOC container way of creating an beans. IOC container way of initializing an object can be customized based on the post processing bean tracker, like before initialization and after initialization, and that can be achieved with this specific class called bean post processor. Okay, this is only for your knowledge I'm giving. To this technically, I don't think you need to be aware of, but still it's good to know about this class bean post processor. Bean post processor. What it does is it will help us to customize the way IOC is going to create an instance. Okay, we can take control. We can take control of this IOC container and give some information to the IOC container. Hey, do these many jobs. While you are initializing the object, please try to do all these jobs. I will write it inside this bean post processor class. You will write your own class called summary, let's say, and that extends bean post processor. And inside this, you will write all your logic of before initialization and after initialization logic. You should not get confused this with post construct and pre-destroy. That is entirely different. That is objects lifecycle method, but this is not lifecycle method. Okay, this is only a tracker, an event. Okay, Before an object is created, there is an event. After an object gets created, there is an event. What should be done? How the object should be behaved? How the object should be constructed can be completely thoroughly customized by the programmer or the developer based on the requirement of the use case. And for that, we can make use of this bean post processor logic. Okay, so customizing the IOC container can be achieved with the help of bean post processor. So this is one more information that I thought I would like to share it. But before that, this is something very, very important. Anyways, I will be sharing this also for your reference. Please go through this. Okay, then only you can be more strong on the Spring core part. Okay, the core is very, very important. Once we are strong in the core and their workflows, their architectures, the IOC containers implementations, at least on the intermediate level. Okay, if you are strong enough, then it's pretty easy for us to climb up the ladder of other libraries of the Spring quickly. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I guess I've taken some 30 minutes of time out here, but still I'm ready to get your questions. Any questions, please do let me know. No questions? Okay. Fine. So having that and having said with that information of the bean post, the lifecycle methods of post, construct, and pre-destroy, we'll try to figure out the way how we can implement that here. Okay, step number 1. Let's understand that the client messaging system is one of the object, right, that we are trying to configure here. Right, we have this configure, or else we can consider even the SMS service. The SMS service object, when it is creating, I need to do a certain certain workaround for the object once after it is created, okay, and before it gets destroyed. Once after the object gets created, I wanted to do something on the object, or I want to do something for that particular process of the object creation. After, before destroying also I want to do certain logic. So how do we get to know that? Now, going to the SMS service, there's one demonstration that I'm showing. So here we have the SMS service class, right? This is considered to be your bean. This is a Spring Bean class. SMS service is a Spring Bean class because this SMS service is managed by IOC container. Whatever class that is managed by IOC container are going to be represented as a Spring Bean. Any other class which is not a part of the management of the IOC container will be treated as a Java bean, a normal Java bean, a POJO class, plain old Java object. Okay, so I'm going to create a method called public void init. Any method you can give. Okay, you can give subarray1, subarray2, doesn't matter. Any method you can give, not an issue. So I'm giving it as an init method. Okay, and here I'm just going to say sysout. And here we are going to say a statement saying SMS service instance is created. Okay. If you want to do some workaround for that object, okay, you can do it. You can try to think of having the representation, like let's say for example, you can just use that this method. So this refers to the the current object, right? So in order to invoke the SMS service, you can make object which is already created by the container. You need to recall that diagram. OK, so there what exactly happens is once the object is created, OK, once the object is created, I want certain logic to be applied for that object, then you can make use of this init method. You can say this and do some access of the method, or you apply some value to that variable. So let's say, for example, I have string default number of message. OK, so this is actually 0. Right now, what I can do is I can use this dot, the default number of message equals, let's say 10. OK, so I'm sorry. So what happens here is we are trying to set some value instead of 0. Once this init method is called, once after the object is created, immediately the default number of message will be set to 10 messages. OK, so this kind of business operations which you can think of, OK, according to the use case, and try to embed within this init method. Again, I'm saying the method need not be init. It can be anything. I can also give Balaji here. Doesn't matter. OK, anything would suffice. Not necessary that you need to follow this naming convention, but always we tend to see such kind of a names more relevant for the logic that we are trying to implement, because it's post construct and pre-destroy. So post constructing the object, this method will get invoked. That is the meaning. Next one is public void destroy, and this method will be invoked pre-destroying the object. Before destroying the Spring Bean object, this lifecycle method will get invoked, right? Before destroying the Spring Bean object, this particular lifecycle method will get invoked. That is the meaning. Okay, so here again you can do certain things. So let's say, for example, you have some connection object kept here. Okay, connection object is prepared and kept some connection object, some message queue related connection object, or database connection, some connection object. In destroy method, what you can do is you can just close the connection of that object before the actual object is getting destroyed, before the bean object, some operation which you can think of doing it here. And so right now I'm just going to give some sysout to understand if this destroy method is called at the right place. So SMS service object is going to be destroyed. So like which in all the bean classes like SMS service, mail service, Twitter service, client messaging system, all are managed by Spring Bean, right? In all the classes, you can have this kind of a lifecycle methods. But how this lifecycle method will be invoked? So if I run this program, or if I run the whole application, you notice that there is no output of these methods. So meaning is these methods are not invoked. Why? Because the container is not getting to know that there is a init method and destroy method. There is no availability of init method and destroy method. So IOC container should know about this information. So you should either configure in the configuration class, Java configuration file, or you need to use annotation out here. So annotation will be pretty simple, but anyways, I'll show you both the ways. One is configuring in the configuration class to invoke the respective lifecycle methods, or you can use the annotation, okay, in order to invoke these methods. So either way, you need to communicate to the IOC container then only the IOC container will get to know the presence of these lifecycle methods. Otherwise, it's just a non-lifecycle methods. It has to be invoked explicitly by the programmer or the developer at the time of code. So that's not what I wanted. I wanted these lifecycle methods to be called automatically. Okay. Fine. So let's go first to the messaging system configuration. So this is the configuration for SMS service. When this SMS service object is going to be created, after creating, it should call the init method. So you have a property called init method. In this init method, you need to drop the method name. Don't give the method name with parenthesis. Okay, just the name of the method. And you have destroy method. Okay, and in the destroy method, I'm going to call it as destroy. Is that destroy we have given? Yes. So if you bind this method init and destroy by this mode of configuration, now the IOC container gets to know that there is a init method and destroy method for the particular bean configuration. So once the object is created, that is, once after the object is created, okay, once after the object is instantiated, it will quickly go ahead and call the init method. And before the object gets destroyed, it will go and call the destroy method of that particular SMS service. But this will not happen for mail service or Twitter service because we haven't created the lifecycle methods like init or destroy in the respective classes like mail service or Twitter service. Is that clear? Okay, so let's see if we are going to get the invocation for those methods. I saved it. We name SMS init method, destroy method, destroy SMS service. Correct. So yeah, you can see that SMS service instance is created. Can you see this? Before we didn't get this output, but destroy is not happening. Actually, it might have happened, but the call doesn't happen to it because we have not called the shutdown mechanism for the IOC container. When the destroy method will be called, destroy method can be called when the object is going to get destroyed. How the object can be destroyed? You have to call the shutdown process for this IOC container. When the container is going to get shut down, at that time only the objects in the pool will all get thrown into the garbage. Before the object goes to the garbage, it will go and call the destroy method and release all the resources. You might be having some resource allotted for this object. You can release those resources allocations, or you can do some other operations in the destroy, and then you are ready to move the object to the garbage. You're getting it? So now you are not seeing the output of the destroy, but you are seeing the output of the init method. SMS service instance is created. SMS service instance is created. So we can also think of having this app. Okay. Before sending the method, I just want to remind that the number of message plus. Okay, so here we cannot access that, right? So it has to be accessed inside. We don't have that object out here. So here, sysout plus iMessage service dot. Okay, so this should be typecasted to SMS service in order to access the property of that class exclusively. So if I run this, you can see the messages, number of messages 10, but the object initialized with the number of default messages what? 0. How come it got changed to 10? If I'm not invoking this init method, let's assume that I'm not going to call the init method. Okay. I'm not going to give a call to the init method. If I'm not going to call to the init method, this init method is not going to be called after the object is created. So at that time, the default number of message is going to be 0. You can see that. Okay, the default method, default message, number of message is 0. But if I give an invocation to the init method, there where you can see the number of message variable is getting assigned to 10, and that is what we are trying to invoke. So we have 10 message maximum that we can send it to another entity, is what is the understanding here. So this is set at what time? Once after the object is created. Once after the object is created, the value, default value is set by calling the init method. Okay. Now, how to call the destroy method, that we will see. Before that, if you have any questions on this lifecycle methods, please do let me know. Any questions on the lifecycle method, please do let me know.
So init method is the keyword that we were using on the particular method SMS service. The name should be init only, or we can customize this method name, sir.
Okay, I guess I've already explained this. You can have it a name as Sabari, or you can have it as Balaji, doesn't matter. If it is a Balaji, then coming back to this place, you should give it as Balaji. That's all. So meaning is, it can be any method name, doesn't matter. It is not necessary that you should follow this init as a naming convention. Is that clear? And the same goes for destroy. You can just have some other name. Okay. So let's say call. But if that is the name that you give, then that name is what you need to invoke it here in the destroy call. So it will go automatically in the SMS service and look out for the call method as a destroy method. That is before destroying method. So, but for our understanding, we give it more reasonable names. Yeah. Any other question? Just a second. Okay. So if things are clear, I guess we can proceed further. So to invoke the destroy method, the one more step that we have to do from the creation of the context. So if you look at the diagram clearly states that at the time of destroying, okay, at the time of at the time of closing the context, okay, at the time of shutting down the IOC object is where we are actually going to invoke the destroying mechanisms for the object. And before the object is getting destroyed, it has to call the respective lifecycle method called destroy. Application stops. Application context is destroyed. Either way, your whole application is stopped. Okay, or your application context is destroyed. Right? So application stop means it should be an abrupt stop event. Okay, like exception occurs so that your application is abruptly stopped and so on. We can think of, but overall understanding is when the application at the time, what happens, the IOC might get destroyed. Okay, sometimes it might not be a proper destroying of the application context might happen. So it's always good to have an explicit call to the shutting down of the IOC container should be in place in your code. Like what I'm saying is, when we are creating the object, then we should close the object properly. When you will close, when the application is done with its job. So this is the last line of the code that will get executed in the whole application execution process, right? So at this point of line, you can just call the application application context. Application context dot close. Okay. So there are two methods. One, you can use close method. What this close method will do is, close method will immediately close your IOC container. So meaning is, if I add this line in line number 37, okay, the IOC container is closed there itself, then and there. After which, if you try to use any of the IOC containers object to get it, it will throw an error because the IOC container is already closed. But you have another method called shutdown method. Okay, shutdown hook method. This method, what it does is, wherever you call the method, okay, in whichever line you call the method, doesn't matter. It will only shut down when the JVM is closed. Java virtual machine for this application which is running, right? The application is running on top of the JVM. When the JVM is shut down, the IOC container will get shut down. Anywhere you can call that method within the code, it won't shut it down instantly. Instead, it will create a flag saying that once the JVM is shut down, the IOC container have to be shut down. But what is the difference between a close and a shutdown is, close is instantly it is going to be closed, whereas shutdown hook will be triggering a flag and make sure that when the JVM is going to be shut down, at that time only the IOC container will be shut down. Till that time, your IOC container accessibility is there, but close method will instantly close it. That is a big difference. Okay, I will show you that. So if you look at this close method, the close method definition is this: close the application context and destroy all the beans in its bean factory. Bean factory means the object pool or whatever. Okay, either way you can call it. It actually, this close method in turn called the do close method. Okay, do close method. That is the actual method that it calls. You're getting it. So this is what is closes. The other one is application context dot shutdown register shutdown hook. Register, it's just registering it, but not shutting down instantly. This will be done at the time of the JVM is getting closed. Okay, closing the context on JVM shutdown. When the JVM is going to be shut down, at that time, this particular IOC container will also get closed. And this will also in turn call what? The do close method only. It is also going to call the work, delegates the work to do close. Okay. So do close. Right. So this is the big difference. Anyways, now let's see. You can notice that there is no call to that destroy method have happened so far. Correct? We didn't get the destroy output. The destroy method lifecycles output was not found on the console, but we can just try to run them right now. Pretty good. So we are going on the right track. You can see SMS service object is going to be destroyed after the call of the method. Actually, the object got destroyed because you have shut down your IOC container instantly by calling the close method. This is one way. Another way is, so let's say after the close, I'm just going to call the application context dot get bean of, let's say, SMS service dot class. Why there's an exception? You're trying to access the bean and you're trying to access the container which is already closed. The IOC container is closed. After closing the IOC container, you are trying to access the object of the SMS service which was initialized by the IOC container, which is actually lost. We have lost the SMS service object. Correct, because it's been garbaged. Illegal state exception. Illegal state exception is the type of exception that we are facing. And what it says is clearly, hey, developer, the annotation config application context number reference is already closed. Has been closed already. So you don't have a choice to go and access that object again because the object is already garbaged since the IOC container is shut down. So after shutting down the IOC container, there is no point in using the IOC container to access any object because it is dealing with the type of exception called illegal state. So what is the state? Actually, the state is closed state. If it's a closed state and if you try to access the container as though it is like an opened state, then obviously it is an illegal state exception is what we will face. So these type of exception, probably you can recall it. Illegal state exception is one of the exception that will be raised once the IOC container is closed explicitly. Is that clear? Now, in place of this close, instead of close, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this register shutdown. After the register shutdown, then I'm going to again use the application context to see if I'm able to get the object. So now if you look at this, no problem at all. Why? Because it's just registers the flag, but actually it is not instructing the IOC container to get shut down. It is just registering it when the JVM is going to be destroyed. So you can see the SMS service object is going to be destroyed is coming here. Why? Because it came to the end of the line. Once it comes to the end of the line, actually the application is going to be closed, right? So JVM would have got closed. At the time of closing the JVM, the container will get shut down. So you will get the output. SMS service object is going to be destroyed as the last output. The very last line. Actually, it should have raised it in this line itself, right? This output, destroy method output, should come on this line itself. No, it won't come because it is considered to be the last line, because at that time only the JVM is getting shut down or the JVM is getting closed. So when the JVM is shut down, then the context, the container, IOC container context will get shut down. That is the understanding. Is that clear? Hope you are understanding how to handle the lifecycle methods. So every Spring Bean classes can hold their respective lifecycle methods. So I used to ask these questions while I'm interviewing the candidates for my project. I'll ask them what exactly happens while you're shutting down the container. I'll just ask them to explain the workflow, actually what happens when the container is getting shut down. Okay, what are the different ways to shut down the container? How the lifecycle methods are getting integrated during the shutting down process of the IOC container, kind of a question that I used to throw to the candidates. So to understand if they are having the depth of knowledge in the IOC container level. Okay. So now you can look at this diagram once again to reiterate that this is how the complete workflow happens. So before, after creating an instance, there is a post construct, and before destroying the object, there's a pre-destroy process is happening. That is, init and destroy methods are called, and the init method and destroy method configurations are kept in place in the configuration code itself using this properties of the @bean annotation. Any questions, please do let me know.
Yeah, sir. So Himanshu here, right? So I have one question. This is regards to the shutdown, right? So I understood the difference between them. So once we do a shutdown, at that time as well, uh, uh, my understanding is that it still invokes the destroy method, right?
Come again, Himanshu. You mean this particular line of code? This one?
Yeah, sorry, your screen for me is still sort of in. It's my connection issue or yours? I'm not sure. Yeah, now I can see it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, sir. So what I'm asking about is the register shutdown hook, right? When I'm talking about application context dot register shutdown hook, when I call this, so I understood that once we JVM shutdowns this we sort of calls the destroy method, right? So my understanding is still is the destroy method which we created, right? The life cycle method, destroy method, that it is still being invoked when JVM is getting shut down, right? That's my understanding.
Yes, absolutely
right?
correct. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
So what it means that, let's say if I want to do some sort of a cleanup when my JVM is getting shut down, I can use this destroy method to do those cleanups, and that would sort of get invoked, right? Okay.
Correct. So the difference between a close and a shutdown is only the time when it is invoked.
Got it.
Close is invoked even before JVM is shut down. Your IOC container is shut down.
Right.
You're getting it. So we have a JVM. Okay. Inside the JVM, let's say for example, I have an IOC container running. Right. And inside the IOC container, the objects are all placed. Correct. Now, right. When I say close, the application is still running. So let's say this is the application. The application is still running. Okay. When I say close, the IOC container is closed immediately, but JVM might be running.
Correct.
Application might also run because the application might used for some other logic which is not necessarily linked with IOC container.
Correct.
Okay. So close is instantaneous shutting down of the IOC container. But register shutdown, what will happen is only when the JVM is going to be shut down, at that time the IOC container will get shut down, not instantly. So in both the cases, 100% the destroy method will be called, and we will get to know the output of the destroy method.
Right.
Okay. But when the destroy method is called is a question. Whether the destroy method is called instantly when a close is called, or is that going to be called only at the time of JVM shutdown? That is what makes the difference between a close method and a register shutdown hook method. That's all. But your understanding is yes, absolutely, it's correct.
Right.
Yeah. Do anyone have any other question? Okay, so if there are no questions, I guess then we can proceed further. Okay. Now, going back to the configuration, yesterday we discussed more in detail about the usage of lazy, right? Now we'll see in practical. So I'm going to use this as at lazy, and this is by default enabled to be true. Okay, so if it is true, so you can see that the output is all same. Okay, your SMS service instance is created and the SMS service object is going to be destroyed, is all coming up. Everything is same. Okay, but we have just added this lazy. So lazy means, as I said, the initialization of that object is going to be at the time of invocation only. So before that, it's not going to happen, right? So that's what the understanding is. So at the time of invoking the object for the SMS service, it's going to invoke the specific lifecycle methods, and it will make use of the object. So when I say at lazy here, and let's have an understanding of using this object, or lazy. I guess we can, yeah. Okay, we have to simulate this in order to understand this destroy. So here we have get Venus and service. Okay. Okay, I guess we'll try this way in annotation based. I'll try to explain this lazy there, since we are going for manual configurations. Actually, we are supposed to get an error, so we need to simulate in that way that the object is lazily loaded, and if we try to access that object prior to that, we get an exception. Let's make use of this application context. Contain bean. Boolean is true. Okay, I'll do one thing. Okay, I guess to simulate this, we have to think the other way around. At lazy, just true, being a CMS, client messaging system. Object is loaded. So application context or contains bean, and it is a scope is semi10. Okay, let me see what is the code that I've written there. Okay, let me take you with the annotations. Let me check that way, because I'm not able to simulate this lazy right now here. I'm just trying to apply this lazy because the loading of the bean happens only at the time of requesting the object. So to test this, we have to go with the annotations. Let me check that. Anyways, I'll sync with this. We'll keep this aside right now. Okay, yeah, now coming to this configuration. So we have done a lot of configurations here. You can see that. I don't want to do any of these configurations as of now. So literally no configurations will be there. So all configurations code will be removed, and the classes, the configuration class is literally empty right now. Okay. I'm keeping it empty. So the class is thoroughly empty, but still we wanted to do the similar configurations of what we have done in the manual configurations without writing the configurations and by using the annotations explicitly. So how do we do that? The first thing is we need to ensure all the Spring Beans classes are demarcated as a component classes. It should be represented as a component classes. Okay. So the first thing is the SMS service, let's say SMS service or mail service or Twitter service, we have to mark them. The class should be denoted as a component class. The component annotation is the base annotation. And on the layer of the component, we have multiple annotations out here. At service, we have at repository. OK. At service, at repository is also treated as a component only. So if you see here, every Spring Beans have to either be annotated with component, or it should be like service. So service is internally having component. Okay. At repository is internally having component, but component, if you see, that's the root. Component is the root. Okay, and you don't have any further root for it. So let's say at component. Okay, you don't have any other root reference of this component annotation, because the component annotation acts as a base annotation for referring a Spring Bean as a component bean. So you can either have a at component or at service or at repository, or even an at configuration is a component by default. At configuration is also a component type. So if you go back to the configuration, if you hover the cursor here, on top of hovering the cursor, you will see that it's a component. Oh, there's an error. So you can see that this configuration is also referred as at component. Okay, the Java doc is not picking up while I've hovered the cursor on top of it, but you can notice that the configuration annotation is also an at component. So now, instead of manually going and referring in the configuration class and then denoting it as a Spring Bean reference, we can just use it with the single annotation called at component. Automatically, the IOC container will consider the classes which are marked as component, okay, which are marked as component to be a Spring Bean component. So for those Spring Bean component, automatically the objects will be started to get created by the IOC container. The IOC container will start creating the object of all the Spring Bean classes which are demarcated as at component or at service or at repository or even at configuration. Okay, then you have at controller. In Spring Web application, when we come, we'll be discussing about at controller, at rest controller. Okay, so all these annotations are of type component only. The base is component. So any Spring Bean class are marked as component. IOC container will automatically create an object for that classes which are flagged with any of these component types. It could be service or it could be repository. So repository, we deliberately use it in DAO, data access object, while you're communicating with the database. We have a JPA repository, we have CRUD repositories. So in that specifications, we'll be using at repository annotations. So when we are using these annotations will make the IOC container to recognize that as a Spring Bean and automatically start creating an instance for it. But it can't do that understanding of the Spring Beans automatically. For that, we need to instruct the IOC container to go and scan through the packages. Through the packages that you mentioned, it will go and scan it. Once it starts its scanning process, when it is scanning, when it encounters the classes with at component or at service or at repository, it will automatically start creating an instance. But how do we instruct the IOC container to scan it? That's why we have one annotation called at component scan. annotation, at component scan annotation, and through this at component scan annotation, we'll be able to scan through the packages. Whichever package that you want to refer, you can just refer. It will go into that package and look at all the classes and see which class is having those annotations. For all those annotated classes which are to be considered as a Spring Bean by the IOC container, it will start creating an instance for it. So the important annotation that you have to notice here is at component scan. Now the next question is, where do we place this at component scan annotation? We will place it in the configuration class. In the configuration class, instead of having too many lines of configurations, you can eliminate all, and then you can replace everything with the help of annotation itself. And in this configuration class, the only thing that goes up is at component scan. Is that clear? It just makes this at component scan to scan through the packages and understand all the classes which are marked as component or services. So what are all the classes that we have? So what are the classes that we have here? We have mail service, Twitter service, SMS service, and the client messaging system. All are considered to be a Spring Bean classes, correct? That's how we represent it so far in the configuration code. Now, whatever you have configured here, the profile, the bean, the init method, everything we can do there. Okay, whatever configuration we have seen so far, everything is applicable even in the annotation scenario. So now we are solely relying on the annotation based configurations now. Java based configuration is further reduced. If you go for Spring Boot will further reduce your configurations in many areas, like database connectivity. It will be automating the process. So a lot of other advantages which you can see when you enhance it to Spring Boot. Now, what we are trying to eliminate is manual configurations of Java based is reduced and replacing it with annotation. When you move up the ladder of Spring Boot, you will further notice that your level of application creation is going to be much easier without having any lines of configurations at all. Here, at least we might be entitled to have few configurations, which I will show you through this Spring JDBC. But when you go up to the ladder of the Spring Boot, it's going to be automated much more further through the annotations itself. So life is going to be pretty simple. Now, one thing that you have to do here is, along with that configuration, you have to co-join with at component scan. Okay, at component scan, and in that component scan, you have to use the base package properties, base packages. You can give as many number of packages that you want to list out. Okay, only those packages it will go and scan, and it will start looking for the presence of the component classes, and it will start creating an instance. So now I'm just going to give the base package called com.messaging system. Okay, so you can notice that I have mentioned the com.messaging system, which is your base package, correct? Under this base package, you have client, okay, or you might have service. So this is package 1, and under this there is a package 2, and under this there is a package 3, and under this there is a package 4, and under this package 2 there is another package called ABC. Under this there is another package called DEF. Under this there is another package called XYZ. Under this there is another package called OPQ, which is your base package. These are all child packages, right? These are all child packages. Who's your rootmost package? Package 1, right? Now, equivalent to this package 1, I'm going to have package 2, or let's say new package. There is a package name called new package. Okay, so this new package is not a sub package of the package 1. Please make a note of it. This is a parent package, and these are all your child, inner child, right? All these are child. This new package is your another parent. But what is the relationship between these two packages? This package and this package, what is the relationship? Are they parent child? No, they all in the same level. So this is called as siblings. It is a sibling package. It's a sibling of this one. Okay, you'll have com.pack1, com.newpack. So their parent is com, but I have given the reference to pack1 only, com.pack1 only. So when I say com.pack1, the scanning will happen only through this channel of com.pack1 and go to the childs of every packages. All packages it will go and scan. But your IOC container will never scan this because it is a sibling. To include this, you have to give comma and say com.newPackage. So all siblings have to be listed out here. All siblings have to be listed out here. Only then the sibling packages will also be considered by the IOC container to go and scan for it and identify the presence of component classes and start creating an instance for it. But right now we have only one level, com.messaging system, and that's why the property name is considered to be a base packages, right? How many packages you can refer there? N number of packages. All can be of a siblings or different sibling levels also you can apply there. But when you mention one parent, their innermost child, it will go till the innermost child and it will scan through all the packages and understand if any class is having a component annotation, automatically it will start creating an instance for all those classes and keep it in the instance pool or the object pool. That is a meaning of this workflow. But I'm not writing any single lines of code here, which is essentially not required. You're getting it? So this is one important thing. So component scan is very important. Now, if I run this, you will get a n number of error. The reason is component scans are there, but the IOC container is unable to figure out the presence of component classes. So you can see the very first thing that you are opting for is client messaging system. That itself is unavailable. No such bean definition exception. Why there is no such bean definition exception? That bean is not configured here. We haven't configured that bean. Only when you configure the bean, the IOC container will get the details from the configuration and then it will start creating an instance for this class. But now the instance or the bean instance is not there because scanning is happening. Component scanning is happening, but this class is never marked as at component. You either mark it as at component or you deliberately come here and provide your manual configuration. Either way, you need to do it. Are you getting it? So by that way of understanding, it's better we go to the client messaging system and mark them as at component. I'm sorry, at component. Okay. So by marking this, now you will see this error will be resolved, but the next error will occur. What was the next error? Okay, literally it's not an error, but if you see here, the message is 0 because the instance is not, it is unable to auto-wire the instance. Okay. And the SMS service instance is not getting injected properly because the SMS service is not being traced out by the container for creating an instance for it. So that's why those init and destroy logic is also not happening appropriately. So what we do right now is going to the SMS service. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I've already given component, right? So that's why error is not. So what is the challenge here is, the challenge here is, yes, we have the init method. Sorry, we have the init method, but this init method is not called. Actually, I forgot that I kept this at component. See that? If I'm not going to give that component, as I said, the exception will occur. Before the exception was for client messaging system, but now the exception is for not for the client messaging system, but for the iMessage service. So the iMessage service in the client messaging system, we are doing an at auto wired, right? At auto wired iMessage service. Let's say SMS, for example. Now, when we are doing an auto wiring for this, you should have either one of the object, correct? iMessage service object should be there, SMS or mail or Twitter. Some object should be there of the iMessage service type, but that's not there because none of the services are marked as at component. I've removed that. So that's why that instantiation process is not happening properly. So now let's go ahead and give that. So at least one SMS service object will be available so that you won't get any exception right now. The same thing which you can do it for other. Now the exception doesn't occur because only the SMS service is treated to be a component and that SMS service object is injected. But why the 0 occurs here? Why the init method and destroy method is not invoked? Because before what we did was we configured, while we are creating the SMS service bean, we configured to call the init method and destroy method, correct? We configured explicitly to call the init method and destroy method, but right now we are not doing so. So in that case, how to invoke the init method and destroy method if we don't have a manual configuration is you can go through the channel of annotation again. So before this method, you can just apply at post construct annotation. There's an at post construct. What happened? At post construct. Let's check this. Actually, we have to go for a library. Let me see which library it falls under. I'm unable to trace out that annotation right now here. Yeah. So we have to go for Post construct. My system is a little slow. Let's wait. Actually, what happening is we are looking out for the annotation of the post construct, which is not a part of a Spring library. Okay, so it's a part of a Javax annotation, I guess. So we'll just check from that context. Construct. Yep. So post construct, and we have at free destroy. Actually, it is borrowing. Okay. Due to the conflict process that happens in the dependency injection, the Spring framework is actually borrowing the annotation from Javax library. Okay, so that's why I included that library. If you notice here in the pom.xml, I've just included the library called Javax Annotation Api. Okay, Javax is advanced Java representation. Okay, extended to the core Java. Javax, under the Javax library, you have annotation, and in that annotation, we have post construct and pre-destroy, and both are getting borrowed by Spring framework. Okay, so actually it's been a long back that I recall this post construct, so that's why I forgot that library name. Anyway, so now so we don't need to do a manual configuration. Instead, you just go ahead and apply this post construct and pre-destroy on the method level, and you can just run them and see right now the proper post construct will happen and the pre-destroy will also happen. So SMS service instance is created, which is your post construct, and SMS service object is going to be destroyed, which is your pre-destroy. Before the message was 0, now the message is counted to 10 because this method is invoked. So how do you invoke? If it's a complete annotation based configuration, how do you invoke the lifecycle methods? Is with the help of the special annotation called at post construct before the method and at pre-destroy before the method. This seems to be more easier than we go ahead and configure in the class level. I'm sorry, in the programmatic level. In the programmatic level, we do a manual configuration and we say init method property, init method, destroy method property, and destroy method. Names have to be affixed. But right now, that's not the case. You can just write the method and straightforward, you can apply the annotations. But the only thing is these annotations are borrowed from the Javax annotations. Okay, so just make a note of it. And this is considered to be a component. We have already marked it as a component. But if I go to the Twitter service and there also if I mark a nut component, then you will have a bigger challenge. So here you can make as component. And going to the mail service, also we mark them as at component. Now how many components are there? 3 components are there. When the IOC container is scanning, okay, when the IOC container is going to scan, it will get to know that there are 3 classes are marked as component and all the 3 classes are iMessage service. So how many iMessage service object will be there right now in the container object pool? 3 object will be there. One SMS, one mail, another one is Twitter, correct? So now the challenge is, before it was only one. SMS alone was there because that was the only class that I marked as a component. Now deliberately all the classes are marked as a component, or all the 3 classes are of same type called iMessage service. Now what is the challenge? When you're auto wiring in the client messaging system for this particular class, what is going to happen? It's going to end up with a problem saying there are three types of same object is available. When you're auto wiring for that instance of iMessage service, it says that there are three objects are again sitting. So I am unable to inject the right one. So you'll get that kind of an exception. So we have to try to resolve that. So when I run it, see, unsatisfied dependency. The problem is it is saying mail service is there, SMS service is there, and Twitter service is there. All the three services are found for the same type called iMessage service while you're trying to do an auto wiring for this object. So you're asking for which one? Is that a SMS service or is that a Twitter service or a mail service? So that confusion still arises, and we have a solution for that, a best solution for that to resolve the problem. I'll let you know the solution after a break, but before that, if you have any questions, please let me know till whatever we have discussed. So one thing is, please make a note of it, at component scan. Okay. The next one is all to be marked as at component. So can we mark this as at service? Will it be considered? Instead of at component, I'm going to mark it as at service. Will this be considered? Of course, the same error is what you're going to get because client messaging error will not be there, but other three conflict error will be there. At service will be considered. Okay, still the same mail service, SMS service, Twitter service, but it has the IOC container have already found the instance for client messaging system. They have already created the instance for the client messaging system because client messaging system is recognizable by the IOC container even if you apply them as a service. So what is then the difference between an at component and at service? That depends on the level of use case that you're going to use. When we go for the web, you'll be using controller. Okay, you'll be using DAOs. Okay, you'll be using a normal standard classes, Spring Bean classes. So at that time you can differentiate them. Okay, so this is going to be considered as a repository. This is going to be considered as at controllers. And in MVC, okay, model view and controller pattern, you will have the flow as controller, service, DAO, and the database. Correct? So you will hit the request to the controller. Controller will go to the service. Service will go to the DAO, and DAO will hit the database. All three should be of Spring managed bean means. You can give at component everywhere, not an issue. It still will work. But for our reference to differentiate the three, we are going to use it as at component here, and here it's going to be at service, and here it's going to be at repository. Okay, it's only to differentiate the logic of each and every component. But the base for all is component only. So you can either have component or you can have repository or service, doesn't matter. Still it will work. You're getting it? Yeah. So any question? Till this, if you have any question, please let me know. And we'll go for a short break and then we'll come back and continue. So what I'm trying to explain here is both manual configuration and without manual configuration. Going forward, it's going to be more of a reduced manual configurations because we are going to meddle with more of annotation based rather than manual configuration. Okay, and that is what seems to be more interesting. But before we get into the interesting chapter of coding the Spring application, it's better to understand all the manual flow of settings as well. So always it will help you that this is the way how the logic actually works. If I have not teach you these things, okay, I can directly come and say, hey, create a control component. Automatically the instance is the class is recognized and the instance is created. We can learn that way also, but the maximum depth of knowledge which you might be missing, because that's the core part and that's the fundamental thing which you should be aware of. Because suddenly if you are given with some legacy application, you will get stuck. Always it doesn't mean that we'll be working only on the modern application tools. Sometimes there are, right now currently I'm working on a legacy application in my organization. Okay, in my current project, it's a legacy application. I'm using EJB. Enterprise Java Bean, which are very old guys. Those are struts I'm using still. Okay, and they are using a pretty older version of Spring, pretty old version. It's somewhere 2.x version of Spring, which is solely created only with the XML. It's XML based configuration, not even a Java based configuration. I'm still meddling with that XML based configuration, and it's a mixed up of technologies. Struts is there, Spring is there, we have EJB is there, REST services are there. So it's more than 3.5 lakh code base. The whole application is 3.5 lakh code base. Okay. So the thing is, only when you understand the depth of the technology, you can sustain well on the same technology whenever the technology grows, right? So that's why it's always good enough to go more in detail and understand the base before you step into the more advanced features like annotations usages. So if you have any questions, please do let me know. No questions? Hope you're all awake. Okay, fine. If there's no question, I guess we'll just take a short break, a 10 minutes break, and then we'll come back. Thanks. Hello. Am I audible? Please confirm.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
So, is there any queries or doubts that you have? Have you figured out any questions or queries? No questions? Okay, so how do we make this as these components as prototype or singleton? So by default, it's going to be singleton, right? That's what we learned yesterday. You can use at scope here before the class level. You can use at profile. Whatever we did there, everything is applicable before the class. Okay, so you can use at profile and then give it as day or test or whatever it is. And you can also use at lazy here. So all the annotations are applicable. Okay, in the scope, you can just go ahead and provide them as a prototype. Okay, here we deliberately give it as prototype. Prototype, right? So this is the way we actually use the annotations henceforth effectively before the class level. We don't need to rely on a special configuration class. But shall we throw away the configuration class? Shall we throw away this configuration class? Anyways, we are not going to use anything out here. It's going to be empty completely. Configurations are empty. Can we throw away this class? No, you can't, because this is the base configuration class, which is denoted as at configuration, from where the configuration logic happens. But that configuration is through annotations. And the next important thing is component scan. So for this purpose, at least you need to have this class. But internally to the class, you don't need to have any of these configurations, manual configuration codes. So almost you can see some 50 lines of code I've written, but right now I've eliminated all the 50 lines of code and replaced all the configuration straight into the class level itself by using the multiple levels of annotations. You can line up all these annotations before the class level itself. That is the understanding. Hope this is pretty clear. OK, but let's go ahead, and I'm just creating one more class here. OK, let's let it be the SMS service itself. And I'm not going to use this, or let's say, let me create one more class. And the class name is employee service. And this employee service is going to be marked as at service. Instead of at component, I'm going to use at service. And at lazy. OK, and I'm going to have a couple of methods of init and destroy. Actually, init is sufficient to understand the lazy. Destroy is not required. So let me go to this and paste and say employee service instances created. OK, so it's just an empty class. It doesn't matter. I've marked it as a service, and this class is also eligible for instantiation purpose. Now going back to the app. So now I'm going to use the request for this employee class. Before that, I'm just going to say the The IOC factory is initialized. Okay. I'm going to ask for employee instance, employee service instance. And that's it. So we don't need to do anything. Now let's see what's going to be the output of this. Okay, so problem there is client messaging system. Okay, so just have a look at it. We got the output temporarily. I've just created one employee service. Okay, and that is marked as at service, and it got instantiated. Okay, so you can see IOC factory is initialized. IOC factory is initialized, and then you get the next output called employee service instance is created. This is coming out of that post construct lifecycle method. Okay, post construct lifecycle method. That lifecycle method is called, and then we are getting this end output. But let's have a look the other way around. The employee service. This is lazy. Now, if you notice, there's a difference. First, what you're getting is employee instance is created and then the IOC factory is initialized. Meaning is what? If we don't offer this lazy for this bean, okay, it's eager loading. So eager loading means at the time of IOC initialization itself, the objects are kept ready. But lazy will come only when you go and invoke it. Only when you go and give an invocation for the very first time as a request, at that time only the IOC container will cook up and load it. Load the object into the memory. So it got reversed. Can you see this? Employee service instance is created is coming first, and IOC factory is initialized is coming second. But if I give this lazy, you can notice that it will get reversed. Please make a note of it. The IOC factory will get loaded because at that time the employee service instance will not get loaded. IOC factory is initialized, and we give a call to the bean. Okay, and after that the employee service instance is created because it is lazy loading. Okay, lazily it is getting loaded. Like for example, let's go back to the app. The loading of instance is something that we have to capture. Now, if you see, only the IOC factory is initialized, but employee service bean object is not loaded into the memory. Why? Because it's lazy. Only when the very first request is given for that particular object, it will get loaded into the memory. Loading into the memory. It's not about creating an instance. It's about loading it into the memory. So you have an object pool. Okay, and it is actually a memory where we are placing the objects, right? So when you are giving the very first request, the object is loaded and readily available. But if it is non-lazy instance, if it's a non-lazy instance, at the time of instantiating the IOC container, immediately it will go and create the object and make it loaded in the memory. So your memory will get loaded even before you request for it. Your object will be loaded even before you request for it. You're getting it? So what technically happens is too many objects will get loaded into the memory and it will consume the memory space and the efficiency of the application might go down. So if you think that you might be having 300 components, Spring Beans, okay, Spring Bean classes, you have 300 Spring Bean classes. Out of 300, I might be in need of only 55 classes to be object to be loaded in the memory. Other need not be loaded into the memory. Then you can make the other 245 classes to be kept under a lazy mode. So by default, it is eager. We don't have any eager as an annotation. Okay, by default, all Spring Bean classes are eagerly enabled. So at the time of IOC initialization, it will do all its job of creating the object and making the object to be loaded. But when it comes to the lazy operation, it will load only when the very first request is given. At that time, the object will be loaded into the memory and kept into the memory. Is that clear? So this is the difference. In the previous demo also it should have worked, but the problem is we were intermittently using the client messaging system, which already auto wire for the SMS service. So that's why that output was not shown deliberately. So that's why I wanted to explain you this way. But ultimately, yes, even in the configuration way, even in this configuration way of this at lazy, it will work. Okay, so here also you can use at lazy and it will work. It will make the object to be loaded only when the very first request appears. Okay, but why we were unable to see that difference is because your client messaging system was already opting for that. So that's the reason. So that's why I thought of creating a new class like employee service, marking it as a service and also flagging them to be a lazy type. And so that through this post construct method, you are getting to know. So when this will be called post constructing the object, correct? Post constructing the object. Post constructing the object. But if you see that the output is not coming, means the object creation mechanism is postponed to a lazy mode. So you are once you give a call to that, then this instance gets created and then the post construct method will get called. But right now I'm not calling that employee service in my application code, right? I've commented, you can see that. But if we call this right now, if we call this, even though it is a lazy, the object will get created at this time and then the post construct will get called. So you can see that post construct will get called, but after the IOC factory is initialized. But if the employee service is kept as false, the lazy value is going to be false. Okay, then what's going to happen is either false or you remove that annotation, it means the same. Now this will interchange. First employee instance created will be happening because eagerly all the objects will be loaded, created and loaded. Okay, and then only the IOC factory is getting initialized completely. Okay, before the IOC container completes its complete initialization process itself, the instances are getting created and loaded into the memory. So we are getting the output first. By this way, you can see the difference of how to manage the object in an eager mode and a lazy mode. Is that clear? If you have any questions on this, please let me know.
Sir,
Yes, please.
is that the purpose of using lazy is to improve the efficiency of the application?
Of course, yes. So the main reason for using a lazy is to gradually improve the performance of the application. That's the main reason. So this lazy eager is actually you might be learning. If you get a chance, you'll be learning in the ORM applications like Hibernate, where it is maintaining the database. So if you say in database we might be having 20,000 rows, the Hibernate ORM will load all the 20,000 rows as a 20,000 object. All the 20,000 object will come into the memory when it is eager. But when it is lazy, all the 20,000 object will not get loaded into the memory. Only when the request is given to the specific set of rows, for that set of rows, the object will be created and those objects will be loaded into the memory. The remaining objects will not come into the picture. Similar approach is what is followed in the IOC container also. When IOC container is dealing with 300 objects, they need not create and load all the 300 objects in the initial time itself at the time of factoring the objects. Instead, they can create it at the time of request is given. It can be even for the singleton beans. So obviously, when there are no much of objects are loaded during the startup time, if you see the application will get loaded much faster. Why? Because the IOC container is actually not involved in creating too many objects and loading it into the memory. It postpones the process of that object creations and loading into the memory because those beans are kept as at lazy. So technically speaking, the lazy is actually one area is to ensure that it is improvising your performance of your application. The second use case that you can think of having a lazy is at the time of loading, I don't need that object due to some security constraints. I want to postpone that object only during the request time. Due to the security reason also you can, because out of 300, only one object you want to be kept as lazy. Because of security reason, you can postpone that loading of object. When there is a need occurs, let the IOC do its job. In that use case also you can see, but predominantly the use case is used only for improvising the performance of the application. Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Do anyone have any other question? Okay. So if there are no questions, I guess we have to deal with that problem of that SMS service, iMessage service, which is having multiple instances, right? So that logic we have to resolve. So let's bring back this code. So when I'm accessing the instance, there are three components are there. Okay, in the client messaging system, I would have commented service, right? I talked over it. So you can notice that there are mail services there, Twitter service is there, okay, and SMS service. Now, if you look at SMS service, I guess SMS service is not listed out here because I've already marked it, I guess, as a lazy. So let's comment out this lazy. Now you will see this is another understanding. Now you will see all the three will come up. Okay, it's a profile. Just remove this prototype. Now you should see all the three comes up. So there are three iMessage services are found. In spite of lazy, it's 3 because the invocation happens. It is lazy. Okay, it is lazy. Right, it is lazy. But your auto wiring auto wiring for iMessage service. So when the iMessage service auto wire happens, it is going and looking out for the beans. Beans of like SMS service is also an iMessage service, so it automatically creates an object. So this is a place where you actually invoke this particular SMS service. So that's why the difference we are unable to notice. Okay. That's the reason I took you through an employee service to make you clear that how the lazy works. Otherwise, visualizing the lazy is a little complicated when you are auto wiring for those type of classes. So that's why I halted there and created a new employee service to visualize and understand the lazy works this way. Actually, lazy is working right now, but the thing is you auto wire for the iMessage service where the SMS service is also an iMessage service. Auto wiring is also equivalent to a call to the specific object, right? So it automatically creates an object and gets it ready. So that's why you are still seeing that 3 out here. Okay. So all the 3 services are objects are available, but which service do you want? So how do we resolve this conflict? How are we going to resolve this no unique bean definition exception conflict? To resolve this no unique bean definition exception conflict, the easiest way is, so before that 2 appeared here because we kept it as prototype. What does a prototype means? Prototype means only when the request comes in, the object will be given, and that too n number of times the object will get created. As many number of times you give a request, the object will get created. You're getting it? So prototype is different from lazy. Lazy, you can use it typically to postpone the creation of the object. But prototype scope is different. Okay, scope means every time when you give a request only, the object will be cooked up and given to you. Okay, so combining a scope and a lazy will not make any difference. So ideally, if it's a singleton, then you can think of having a lazy. But if it's a prototype, there is no point in having a lazy out there. Okay. So try to have that combination. Lazy combined with singleton makes sense. Lazy combined with prototype doesn't make sense because prototype object will come into the picture only when you give a request, and as many number of time you give a request, the object will be acquired. But singleton, as the name suggests, singleton, it's only a single object representation. When there is a single object representation, you can think of combining it with lazy to postpone the creation of the object from the IOC container environment. And you can instruct the IOC container to create it, that single object, even when you need, not before that. When I'm in need, please create that single object and give it to me. If I'm not in need, please don't create it by yourself default. The postponing work is what is happening in the lazy combined with singleton. Okay, so now looking at this flow, the problem is I want SMS service actually. So what I'm doing is if you go there to the client messaging system, it's just iMessage service. If I'm giving it like SMS service, okay, and everywhere it's going to be mapped as SMS service. So we still have the similarity of the exception, as you can notice. So the name what we give here doesn't make any big difference. This name and the class name is same, so that can be related, and automatically will the container not auto wire to this class? No, it won't do it. The reason is this will not make any difference of the naming standards. So we need to deliberately go ahead and say with the component providing a name for it. Okay, a name. I'm sorry. So you have a value, giving it as SMS. By this way, a name is assigned. So if I go back to that client messaging system, if I'm using SMS, think that I'm using SMS, keeping that the name of that component is referred as SMS, and here also I'm just typecasting it to SMS. The typecasting is required because I just want to use the SMS service features. So you can see that the auto wiring is not successfully happening. No such bean definition exception, no bean named CMS, some unrelated exceptions that we are still getting it. Okay, so to resolve this issue, we can think of having at qualifier, and in the at qualifier I'm just going to give it as SMS. What's the issue here? Yeah, now the problem is this. Yes, sorry. Let's take this out. There's no bean called SMS. CMS. See, okay, this CMS is a problem. So if I go to the client messaging system, we can say let's try this way of giving CMS. Okay, so now it's working fine. So if you notice here, there are two approaches. The name what you have given here is what is the name I'm trying to use in the app. Before, if you have noticed in the manual configuration, we have given @bean name equal to CMS, but this time in the client messaging system directly I've given @service value equal to CMS, and that name is what I'm trying to invoke here. Looking at the SMS service again, okay, we have this SMS. I guess this will resolve this issue. Anyways, we'll try this way. Going back to the thing, just checking this out. Okay, I'll come to the qualifier shortly. Now the name is already defined. Okay, so there is no exception here. That conflict exception doesn't occur. The name of this and the name that we have defined in the @ component of the SMS service matches. In the SMS service class, we have given the name as what? SMS, and this name are same. But the problem is, there's one more problem that we have here. I cannot keep changing the name every time, because if I go to the mail service, I'll be having a mail value to be mail, and coming to the employee service, I'm sorry, not to the employee service, Twitter service. If you see, the component value is going to be named as Twitter. So every time I cannot come to this client messaging system and keep changing the names. You're getting it, but you can create 3 objects of the Twitter, SMS, and mail as per the naming standard that we have given in the component and the name that we give here. So the name of the reference variable and the name of the component should be same, so that IOC container can relate that and auto wire them. It will get auto wired. But my understanding is I will use only iMessage service, not with that name. I'm not going to follow the standard of that name to be used here, because I can use this iMessage service for any purpose. You're getting it? So I don't want to use that only for the specific reason of that SMS. So I'll be using either mail or Twitter, doesn't matter. So now in this situation, instead of changing the reference variable name, now if I execute this, so we will be ending up with the same 3 references are there. Which reference you want to map it? Now here where you have a solution, keeping it as a single variable reference, you can have a @qualifier and give the name as SMS. By this way, when we have a @qualifier in place, qualifier is one of the annotation to qualify that particular injection mechanisms. Now the SMS is injected. You can see SMS message is coming. If I say a mail, the name is given as mail. Okay, then it's going to be a mail message. Okay, email message. If I'm going to call the with the name called Twitter, then it's going to be a Twitter message. So qualifier is helping you at the time when you are not eligible to use the reference variable name and the component name to be same. If you are in such scenario where you cannot relate the name of the component and the reference variable name in the injection to be same, then you better go for @qualifier annotation. @qualifier annotation will resolve the conflict that occurs among multiple objects of same type. Multiple objects of same type. What is that same type object is? iMessage service. In this situation, when there are three iMessage types are there, then the conflict will occur. So for that reason, you provide a name for the bean using that component at value equals individual name. You ensure the name of the variable and the name of the component are same, or if you don't have the chance or choice to use the reference variable name and the component name to be same, then you better go for qualifier. @qualifier annotation is exclusively used to resolve the problem that occurs between multiple objects of the same type when injection happens or when auto wiring happens. Is that clear? That's the reason that we go for this concept called @qualifier. If you have any questions on this, please let me know. Any questions?
So, hi, so Himanshu here, right? One question on this @qualifier, right? So, I remember last time you were also mentioning the named. So there was this field with AutoWire, right? The named, wherein you can just give a name as well to map it. Or I'm mixing it up now.
In the auto wired annotation?
So in last session when we were, or maybe last session, right?
Yes.
We were also talking about the named parameter, wherein you can just give a name, right? Just the way we are right now using a @qualifier, let's say a Twitter service. So you had similar to. So now the Twitter is what we have named it. So that there was this parameter called named, right, where we used to give name as a Twitter, and then it used to AutoWire.
Correct. You're talking about this one, right?
Correct. Okay, so that we use at beans. Okay.
This we are using it here in Twitter service directly in the @component value equals Twitter.
Right.
But the problem is to resolve the conflict among multiple things. I am trying to resolve it with the qualifier. Yeah.
Correct. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got that. Yes.
So to relate it, yes, of course, you can see that in the @bean we have a name, mail, Twitter, and SMS. Is what I've replaced here in the single annotation @component value mail, Twitter, and SMS service. So the two ways to access them, as I said, one is through reference variable itself. You can do it, or you can use @qualifiers in order to resolve the issue. So let me give you one more understanding. So we can take it this way: private iMessage service SMS. Okay, this is one reference variable, right? Another reference variable you can have it as Twitter. Another reference variable that you can have it as is mail. But see that the names are same to that what you have kept in the @component. It is same as like even in the bean. this one, and this one should be same, or this one here, and this one here should be same.
Yeah.
So in all these three places, you need to apply what? At auto wired.
Correct.
Right. But in my use case, what I'm saying is, now what happens unwantedly, I'm getting all the three objects wired into this object, correct?
Right.
I might not be using all the three. I might be using either one. So why should I wire all the three objects unnecessarily? This will not relate with any issues. Okay, this is one approach. Another approach that you can think of is you can directly call for that SMS, and you can have any name A1. This will also get resolved. Automatically the wiring will happen. How? Even though the name is different, automatically the wiring will happen without qualifier. Why?
Yeah, because it's taking a SMS service.
Exactly, the data type. Right, now the type should be same. You're getting it. So the component is SMS service data type, and this data type are same. So automatically the IOC container can figure out the object for the SMS service and inject it to this A1.
Exactly.
You're getting it. But the problem is, if I give SMS service might have all methods which is not listed in the interface.
Yes.
So I will not restrict that. I cannot restrict them. Correct. So the client will get full access of the SMS service. In order to reduce the full access of the SMS service, it's always advisable to go via iMessage service. But the problem is, when I wanted to give it this way 3 times, or let's say I have 16 classes of the same type. 16 classes of the same type. Now I need to list out all the 16 classes out here, correct? With that name 16 SMS, Twitter, mail. Instead of doing that way, you can just have a single iMessage service reference variable, use a qualifier to qualify with what type that you want to inject. Simple. That makes it more secured code and as well as an efficient code. So either way you can follow.
Correct. Yeah, got it.
So do anyone have any other question, please?
Sir, you are mentioning a qualifier Twitter alone, right? Name.
Correct.
So you are explicitly muting the remaining two mail service and SMS service, right? Means it's unmuted, not used at all. Anyway, it's loaded but not used.
Yeah. Please make a note of it. The objects are there. All the three objects are there.
But not used.
Yes, but the injection didn't happen.
Right. So
that happened only for Twitter. That happened only for Twitter, but not for the other two. Correct.
Fine. So is there any option? All the three were loaded, and if it's invoked at runtime, anywhere around?
No, all the three are actually loaded only right now.
Yeah,
right?
all
It's
three were
loaded
loaded.
in the memory.
You are insisting like Twitter alone need to be run during the execution.
No, Twitter object alone need to be binded to this place. It's not about using, right? I mean, it's not about calling. It's not about running. I'm saying, see, object is binded to this reference. You're getting it. So
is there any dynamic way, sir? Is there any dynamic way to access options like input by given and executed?
That's what you're asking this one, correct?
Correct. Runtime, can we give anyway?
Runtime, yeah. So this is something a code bounded. Okay. So when it is a code bounded, we have to define it manually. So let's take it this way. There's something called expression language, which I'm trying to use here. Okay. Yeah. But I'm not sure if that is going to be helpful for this particular use case, but I'm just showing you that there is an expression language here. Now let's go ahead and create in the resources directory. I'm supposed to create one resources directory here, right? So right click, new source folder. The next topic is about to discuss on property sources, but I thought we'll take it up in the JDBC. So it's going to be called as source main / resources. And in the resources, we are trying to create one file, and an ordinary file you can create and give a name as application dot properties. Any name you can give it. And here I'm going to say that as message type equals mail. And going back to your client messaging system, I'm offering this as message type. This is runtime, means it is not about dynamically providing it. Again, it is a code level only, but I'm just trying to figure out if this can support us. Okay, because these are code bounded always. So we have to load this property file. To load the property file, you have to go to configuration class. Okay, and here you have to mention at property source annotation. You have to use at property source annotation. And in that class path / application dot properties. So what this step will do is, this is which we are going to use in database connectivity. Anyways, I'm trying to explain much earlier before that. At property source annotation will help us to load the property details in the runtime. So when the property details are loaded in the runtime, all the key value pairs will be available in the runtime. Okay, so IOC container can refer this runtime to look out for all the property and values, and you can access those property values inside your code. Okay, so that is what we are trying to do. But technically speaking, to access the properties inside the code, we'll be using one annotation called at value annotation. In that at value annotation, we are supposed to drop in the spell. This syntax, what you're seeing here, is called as a spell. Spring expression language. Okay, in JSPs also we have similar to this. Okay, so dollar open and close curly braces will be having to denote that it is a JSP expression language. Okay, so similar to that, here we have Spring expression language, and this will help us to dynamically load the value for a property that you mentioned here. The value will be coming from the property file. That is how we refer them. Anyways, I thought of explaining this in the database connectivity, but let's see if this would help us. So already the property source is loaded, application.properties. So that's what the qualifier is not eligible to track that, because this expression language can be manipulated by at value, but not by qualifier. So there's no point in having that expression language statement here. So you have to drop them directly here, saying it as Twitter. This is the only way. Hope.
Got it, sir. Got it.
This is clear. Yeah. So now it will work.
Fine.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay, I guess we're already running out of time. 7:44. So I don't think I can take you to the tour of database today because we have consumed a lot of information. I don't want to overload, but please do try to recall this property sources information which I've told you. Okay, this is to load the property details at the runtime. Okay, in the configuration class level, you have to use at property source. And this application.properties file, whatever you give there, the application.property file will carry the key value combination. Key value. That is how I've given there, right? Probably most of you might have known about it. People who are new learner to it, the property file will have the key value combination. It is actually going to hold the configuration values. The configuration key value combination will be there. Okay, and the extension of the file is .properties file, we call it as. Okay, to load this property key value configurations into the memory, you need to use that property source and refer the file name application.properties. So how do we access that? I can show you that demo. If like, for example, I want this to be accessed, this message type, I want to print. Okay, so I just want to print this information. So how do we do that? Let's go to somewhere in the SMS service. Okay, so here I want to print it. Not in the SMS service. In SMS service. Yeah, in SMS service we have send, right? So here I want to capture that value. So what I can do is I can put a string data at value annotation. Inside this expression statements, and I can give what is the name? The key name is message type. So go to the SMS service and drop it and try to print it. So what is the value for the data? The value for the data should be Sabri is a bad guy, and that will be injected into this data, and I'm using an expression language. Expression language syntax is used to dynamically capture the value, dynamic value through a property file. Okay. Okay, right, this time I'm going for Twitter, right? So let's go back. Where is that? Client messaging system, because I'm opting for Twitter, but I have configured an SMS. So let's go for SMS. Bingo, we got it. So Sabri is a bad guy. So this information is getting into this code. How? Property. So you might be using this in multiple places. So if you suddenly want to change and on the fly, like on the go, suddenly the client says that you want to make a change to the key that has been represented and used across the application, then you can come to the single file representation like property file and change it to the value that you wanted. And you just run them. And that's all the change that you make will get reflected. Are you getting it? So this is the way how you will access your property file, external the resource property file that we have kept here. And to access the property file, to load the property file, you need to mandatorily refer the @property source annotation and refer your properties file. You can have any property name there. It's not application. I can have sabari.property, balaji.properties, parthasarathi.properties, any name.properties you can give, and that is what which you need to capture here. Okay, and if you look at the parameter, okay, you have value, which is an array of string. Okay, value is an array of string. So what you can do is you can use this open and close curly braces. So you can have 10 property files. All the 10 property files can be loaded here using comma separated, because you can't write 2000 lines of property information in a single file. You split them into 10, 10, 100, 100 and create some 20 property file. You load all the property files here using comma separated. Now, one more thing is, if I ask for application 1.properties, okay, and unfortunately the application 1.properties is not available here. So what will happen is, technically it will throw an error stating that, hey, I could not find the application 1.property in the respective class path resource. So could you please give the correct file name so that I can recognize? But unfortunately, I don't want to raise this as an exception. If you don't want to raise this as an exception, then you have one chance of avoiding this exception. Anyways, your file cannot be recognized. You have something called ignore resource not found to true. You want to ignore that and you inject the other property as value here. And by this way, if I run it, you will see that the exception will be neglected, but the value will not be captured. The value is $message type. It is just extracting the syntax that we have enforced, because the property source file is not loaded properly. But I'm not getting the exception. Please make a note of it. I'm not getting the exception because I have ignored that exception. Ignore resource not found temporarily, because I might be in testing time. I'm testing the application, so I don't want the property file temporarily. So I can ignore that and go ahead and do your testing, and after which you can remove this and make it as false. So if you make it as false altogether, now again it will throw an exception because it is unable to recognize the application 1.properties. Okay, so just make it to true and the value will not be extracted. But what if in case if the file is found and ignore resource not found true, anyways the exception is not going to occur. Okay, so but the file is also available, and you'll be eligible to get the value from the property file. You can extract the value from the property file using the similar syntax of the expression language syntax called $open and close curly braces, combined syntax in order to extract the value from the property file. Are you getting it? Is this clear? Anyways, I got a chance to complete this property source information now itself, so that next week we'll directly start into the JDBC. I guess I've touched all areas, major areas of Spring core. Okay, might be a few things I would have not touched. That's okay, but you can go ahead and do some researching and use the documentations and learn more about it. If you have any queries, you can just throw your queries on the group so that I'll try to respond at my best at the earliest. But apart from that, I guess beyond this, you will not get any set of interview questions. If so, if such interview questions are there, then predominantly you should be of 15 years of experience or 10 years of experience on Spring. Other than that, you cannot take up that interview. If any other questions other than this, these questions, whatever discussions that I've had so far, whatever topics that we have discussed is all leading to level 2 and greater than to level 2 also. Okay, and for that itself, you need a person to be minimum of 5+ years of experience on Spring. But if it's more than this, if they are digging too much on the Spring core and they're asking too many technical questions, then obviously that's for the requirement of 10+ years of experience. So it's you, how you put forth your response to the question matters. It's not necessary that always we need to answer for the question that's been asked by the interviewer. Okay, you can also explain them that I'm aware of these skills with the level of experience that I have. Straightforwardly, you can speak to them. Okay, confidently explaining them with more humbled manner so that they will not understand that you're overconfident or it's an attitude issue. In an humbled manner, you can request the guy to give some space to explain what you're having as a knowledge, and probably on the go, you can learn whatever complexity of levels that comes into the technology, so that the other end of the interview will get to know, okay, you're very clear on the concept, what you have been experienced with. Probably you need to be given a space to learn more on the technology. That's all. So it's you, how you put forth into the interview is not something that we need to fear of. Okay, because that's which I'm experiencing every day. Every day I do 2 to 3 candidates interview. Okay, for my project or for the other project requirements I do. The only problem that I face is the people will fear it. Few people are very fearsome in bringing out their knowledge. So you can pause the interviewer and tell them, Spring core, yes, can I take some space to explain what is my understanding and what is the level of experience that I have, so that I can showcase it. All right. So try to be more proactive in giving the response, and you can pause the candidate, the interviewing candidate or the panel, and then you can give your own answer. Okay, so any questions, any doubts which I can clarify? I guess we are already running out of time. We have another 6 more minutes. I can utilize these minutes for responding to your queries. I guess we have also touched the lazy part. So hope you are understanding what the lazy is and how the lazy is working. Lazy is postponing the object creation and the loading of the work until there is a need comes in. That's what at lazy is. You can annotate that lazy on the component level itself. There are different types of components are there: at component, at service, at repository, at controller, at rest controller, and it goes on. Okay, even at configuration is a part of a component itself. Okay. Yeah. Any other question? So actually I was ready with MySQL database, which we'll be using tomorrow, straight to the JDBC. No more single discussion. If anything that comes in, I will teach you along with the Spring JDBC itself, because
Sir, I installed the MySQL, but it is asking some root password, sir. What are you?
For MySQL?
Yes, sir. It is asking some root password.
Yeah, of course, at the time of installation itself, you should have provided the root password, right?
Actually, I give next and finished.
At that time, that's what I'm saying. Sure, it should have prompted for a root password.
Any idea to find out the root password?
You cannot find out the root password, but I guess you can change the root password. Okay, by some different means. I'll try to see what is the steps. I don't think I have that steps right now. Let me see if I have. You can. Otherwise, the only your choice is you have to uninstall and then reinstall it. Okay, but anyways, let me see if I get that steps. Probably you can try to apply that. If not, you just try to focus on uninstalling and reinstalling the MySQL. Be very clear while you're hitting the next is not just like the workflow. So try to understand what each and every screen of that next flow talks about. Be more attentive and then read what it is prompting for and then provide the information. Probably if you would have skipped with the no password also is a problem because it won't accept no password. You can't log in, right? So and I'm damn sure at the time of installation MySQL, sure it will prompt for a password. Either you go for Oracle installation or you go for MySQL. At the time of installation, it should have prompted for a password. Probably you would have missed. Anyways, I'll try to get the solution. If that doesn't work, you try to go for throwing away the existing MySQL instance and then reinstall them. Okay. Any other question? Okay, so people who are little silent, I assume that you're getting the concept. If not, at least try to use the group to throw your queries so that I'll try to respond, or the group members, the part of group people will also respond. So let it be more exchanging of informations. Okay, don't just rely on me. The purpose of the group is to exchange your knowledge. So try to be more active. You don't need to keep awaiting that Sabri will come and keep posting something and we'll follow that. If you learn something, try to share it among the peers, and so that's how the collaboration happens. We need to be having more network. The network appears a positive network, a network towards knowledge enhancements. Okay, so try to create more networks. That's something very important, right? So play yourself in the group and post your part of understanding and knowledge and try to answer someone else's queries. So utilize the group. Technology is vast today and we need to utilize them and adopt and embrace them properly. So the reason I created a group is not just to give a one-way communication. And you don't need to even respond to certain things which I'm throwing. Okay, unless and until if I'm prompting something from you, you can respond. Otherwise, you can just leave it and silently you can keep moving forward. But what I want is please be more active in the group and try to enhance your knowledge. Okay, so that's something very important, which I always wish to do so. And that's why whenever I find time, I'm just researching something and I'm snipping out and throwing it onto the group so that you can learn out of it. The same thing which I need to. It's a bouncing process. So I throw a ball, it should bounce back. When you throw a ball, it should bounce back. So try to make it more interactive, more collaborative. Try to create a connect, a healthy connect, okay, a positive connect, and try to share your informations. As of now, I haven't created a group on the Telegram because there's no chances for that to be created. But unless and until if there is any heavy information that need to be shared, probably I might be creating. But at this point of time, I don't need to create it, so I haven't created yet. So try to utilize this WhatsApp group at the best and start exchanging your informations. I'll try to see if this Wednesday we can have a 1 hour of connect for some queries that you might be having after going through this projects. I'm sorry, the demos, possibly, okay, because I'm too tightly, coupled with my official work. So production process is going on and clients' proposals are going on. So I'm literally engaged on that. If I find time, sure, I'll create a connect session either on Wednesday or on Thursday. Probably we'll try to have one connect for 1 hour and try to handle. This time it's not for ID setup or something like that. It's exclusively for handling your queries. So to be precise, you be ready with all your queries so that we can try to exchange the information at that point of time. And that's it from my side. I guess we are done with it. Have a great weekdays ahead, and stay safe. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shabri.